In the small village of Umuji lived Chief Okafor, the owner of the largest and most successful honey farm for miles around. Chief Okafor to become quite wealthy. This wealth meant he could afford to take multiple wives and have many children, as was the custom. Chief Okafor married his first wife, Adaku, when he was just 20 years old. Adaku bore him his first daughter, Ugo, the following year. Ugo grew up helping her father on the honey farm from a very young age. When Ugo was 10 years old, Chief Okafor took a second wife, Chiamaka. He hoped Chiamaka could give him a son to one day inherit the honey farm, but unfortunately she too bore him a daughter first. They named this second daughter Uloma. Sadly, Chiamaka passed away due to complications from Uloma's birth. Chief Okafor was devastated at losing his second wife, but took solace in his newborn baby girl. As Uloma grew older, it became clear she was Chief Okafor's favorite daughter. He would often praise Uloma for her beauty while ignoring poor Ugo. He bought Uloma colorful new clothes and expensive jewelry, but hardly paid attention to Ugo. This hurt and angered Ugo greatly. She grew more and more jealous of her younger sister. By age 16, Uloma had grown into the most beautiful young woman in the village. She helped Chief Okafor collect honey and had a special way with the bees that none of the other workers had. The bees never once stung pretty Uloma, instead landing gently on her arms to lick up beads of sweet honey. Ugo's jealousy festered until one day she hatched a devious plot to get rid of her younger sister once and for all. If Uloma died, then Ugo would once again have her father's full love and attention, and perhaps inherit the prosperous honey farm one day. The next morning, Ugo put her She went out to the honey farm before Uloma woke up and knocked over one of the beehives, enraging the colony of bees inside it. She then ran back to the family's hut and woke Uloma, frantically telling her that one of the hives had been disturbed and the bees needed calming down right away before they lost the entire colony. Sweet, trusting Uloma immediately jumped up and ran outside in her night clothes to tend to the bees, just as Ugo knew she would. Ugo followed several yards behind Uloma. An evil grin spread across her face in anticipation of what she had set in motion. Uloma arrived at the damaged beehive first and saw the angry swarm circling it. "Don't worry, little ones, I've got you," she softly sang to the bees. But as she reached her arm out expectantly for some to land, instead the entire swarm rushed her at once, furiously stinging the poor girl from head to toe. Uloma cried out in immense pain as hundreds of bees stung her all over her body over and over again. She stumbled backwards, the toxins rapidly overtaking her small body. Ugo watched from a distance as Uloma gasped for breath and collapsed onto the ground, the bees continuing to sting her unconscious body. Eventually, the furious insects sensed she was no longer a threat and returned to their ruined hive, leaving Uloma's still body covered in horrible welts. Ugo waited until the bees fully settled back into their agitated colony before slowly approaching Uloma's motionless form. As she looked down at her sister's swollen and disfigured face, now unrecognizable, a satisfied smile hovered on Ugo's lips. Uloma was dead. Finally, her father's love would belong only to his precious firstborn daughter again. Eager to carry out the second part of her murder plot, Ugo ran back to the village crying and wailing. "Uloma was stung picking honey. We must prepare her body right away," she told the people. The women of the village tisk-tisked what a tragedy it was to lose beautiful young Uloma as they bathed her swollen body and dressed her in fine burial clothes. Meanwhile, Ugo snuck away to Chief Okafor's special bush medicine cabinet. From inside, she carefully removed a smuggled eastern coral snake. Its venom could kill a man 3 times over. Ugo knew her father would handle Uloma's lifeless body to clean it and prepare it for burial, as was his right as patriarch. When he inevitably suffered a bite from the hidden snake, no one would think twice about what caused his sudden death, instead of natural grief over poor Uloma's accident, she wickedly hoped. Ugo slipped back to scrub down Uloma's body with the other women, concealing the deadly serpent under Uloma's burial clothes wrapped around her torso. She then loudly wailed about how distressed her poor father would be over this tragedy, saying someone must be with him when Uloma's body was finally laid to rest in his hut. As the sun began to set, The procession walked slowly to Chief Okafor's compound, with Uloma's wrapped remains carried between them. As Ugo anticipated, Chief Okafor insisted on unwrapping and cleaning his precious daughter's body himself to prepare her for the afterlife. The women left him alone in his grief, with only Ugo as company per her demand. Alone with her father, Ugo hid her eager anticipation beneath a veil of false sadness as Chief Okafor tore open Uloma's wrappings. He unwound the covering around her waist, and suddenly the hidden snake lashed out from within the folds of cloth, sinking its fangs into Chief Okafor's neck before he even had time to react. Chief Okafor shouts out in pain and surprise, but within seconds his cries ceased, and he sank motionless to his knees before Uloma's ill-fated remains. The deadly eastern coral snake's fast-acting neurotoxin brought on paralysis and death within minutes. As Ugo coldly gazed on her father's fresh corpse laying face down on the floor beside her sister's, a broad grin of satisfaction slowly spread across the murderess's face. At long last, 25-year-old Ugo had gotten what she always wanted ever since her sister was born: the undivided love and attention from her father, Chief Okafor. And now, as his first and only remaining heir, the prosperous family honey farm would go to her alone after the burial grieving was done. Her lifelong jealousy and simmering, hateful resentment had driven her to sinister deeds. But Ugo decided the family fortune she had cunningly claimed would be worth any whisperings. She was now the envy of all the young girls in the village, after all. They could only dream of the secure, wealthy future the newly rich widow Ugo now relished. As she left the corpses and closed up the death hut for the night after carefully disposing of the snake, clever Ugo practiced her fake sobs of anguish she would soon use to convince everyone of her supposed devastating shock and grief over so abruptly losing her dear father as well as sister in one terrible day. Women could be so emotional after all. No one in Umuoji would doubt her sincerity. She was certain. And if any did have their whispered suspicions, what did it matter? No one could prove willful misdeeds now. The dead could tell no tales. Ugo laughed softly to herself in the darkness, confident that the future held only continued prosperity for the daughter that remained. She always knew that zealous Uloma and over-doting Chief Okafor would prove useful to her somehow, if only in their timely dying.